Okay, let's unpack this. We've got a fascinating set of sources today. Not articles or research papers, but raw data.
Yeah, actual data.
Actual data, the Python code used to analyze it, and a summarized report, too.
Right.
Our mission is to really peer behind the curtain of a podcast's performance. We're looking specifically at a show called Cybermidnight Club,
Hmm?
and we're going to use this deep dive to pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge, help you understand listener behavior, content reach, growth, all that stuff in the digital audio world.
Yeah, it's like getting a practical look.
Think of it as a shortcut, maybe.
Yeah.
A shortcut to being truly well-informed about the hidden stories that numbers can tell, especially if you're, building an audience for your own digital content.
And what's genuinely illuminating here, I think, is that we're essentially getting to grips with the digital heartbeat of a real podcast. These aren't just abstract figures on some spreadsheet.
Right.
They represent real people engaging, or perhaps sometimes deciding to, well, move on. And like you said, our sources are incredibly practical. We've got the raw Spotify data itself, the actual Python script that crunched these numbers.
Yeah, the code.
And a succinct report summarizing the findings. So this comprehensive approach, it lets us see the outcomes, yeah, but also kind of get under the hood.
Really see how it works.
Understand the mechanics, how they got these insights, and really importantly, what it all means strategically for Cyber Midnight Club, and by extension, for really anyone creating content online today.
So let's start right at the beginning. The raw material itself. When we deal with this kind of analytical data, it's often organized into something called a data frame.
A data frame.
Now, for anyone maybe not deep into Python or data science, what exactly is that? It's basically how we structure tabular data for, powerful analysis, right?
Yeah, that's a great way to frame it. Think of a data frame as like a really sophisticated spreadsheet, but it's specifically designed for efficient computational analysis. So each column represents a specific metric, maybe plays or followers, and each row is a distinct record. In this case, it's a single day's activity for the Cyber Midnight Club podcast.
A daily log, basically.
Exactly. And this structured approach is just fundamental. It lets us systematically process huge amounts of information, spot patterns, visualize trends over time, all with, remarkable efficiency. Now, when we look at the specific data frame for Cyber Midnight Club, and especially when we check out the dfs.info output from the Python code, some critical details jump right out.
Like what?
Well, first, we see this data set has 2,395 entries. That means 2,395 daily records.
Wow, okay.
So that gives us a pretty comprehensive timeline, right? Nearly 6.5 years of the podcast's daily performance. That's a significant history to work with.
Definitely.
The data types also give us clues. Repredicciones, that's plurifilays, they're stored as integers. Simple enough.
Whole numbers.
Right. But then streams, horas de consumo, hours of consumption, and seguidores, followers, those are floats, meaning they can have decimal places.
Ah, okay. Useful for partial hours or maybe follower counts if they track averages.
Could be, yeah. And hora, UTC, the date and time column, that starts as an object type, which usually just means it's text, like a string. It needs converting before we can do any real time-based analysis.
Got it. But what's really striking, though, and honestly it was my first thought when I saw it, is the non-null count for these columns.
Ah, yes. The missing data.
Exactly. While hora, UTC, and reprodicciones both show 2,395 non-null entries, so complete data for every single day, there's a big difference elsewhere. Streams only has 2,341 non-null entries. Horas de consumo has just 523.
A tiny fraction.
Right. And seguidores comes in at 2,339. So right off the bat, we're seeing pretty substantial gaps in the data, especially for hours of consumption. My immediate reaction to that kind of incompleteness is, okay, is this data even reliable for a proper deep dive? What's your take on these missing values? What are the immediate implications?
That concern is absolutely valid.
Yeah.
And it's a critical observation for anyone looking at data. That non-null count, it tells you directly how many valid or present values exist for each column.
Right. How many actual numbers are there?
Precisely. And when you see a column like horas de consumo with only 523 entries out of nearly 2,400, well, it means for almost 80% of the recorded days, we just don't have data on how many hours people were listening.
80%. That's huge.
It is. And it's not just a minor inconvenience. It can fundamentally skew any analysis that relies heavily on those columns.
How so?
Well, for example, if we just calculate the average daily hours of consumption based on this raw data, that average is going to be heavily understated because all those days with missing data are essentially just ignored or treated as if nothing happened.
Right, they don't count towards the average.
Exactly. So it forces us to ask some crucial questions. Why is this data missing? Was it because Spotify wasn't tracking that metric back then, especially in the early days?
Mm.
Or was there genuinely zero activity on those days, and the system just didn't record a zero, it recorded nothing? Without knowing the reason for the missing data, drawing firm conclusions from those columns becomes really challenging. Missing values can mess up trends, create artificial dips. They could potentially lead to bad strategic decisions if you're not careful.
So it's a big red flag we need to keep in mind.
A huge red flag. We have to acknowledge it and deal with it before we draw any final conclusions.
And we can actually see this visually, right? If we look at the df.head output, that shows the first few rows of the data. And right there, you see NaN values, not a number, popping up in those streams, horas de consumo and seguidores columns for the early dates. It makes it crystal clear that the raw material isn't perfect from the get-go.
Exactly. Those NaNs are just placeholders. They confirm what the non-null count told us. Data is missing. And this leads us straight into that essential phase of data preparation. Making the data actually usable for analysis.
The cleanup phase.
The cleanup phase. And the Python code shows two critical steps here. First, it transforms that hora UTC column from that generic object type, basically text, into actual datetime objects.
Which is crucial for time stuff.
Absolutely vital. Without that conversion, you can't do any meaningful time series analysis. You can't plot trends over months or years. You can't easily filter by specific dates. It just doesn't work.
Okay.
And once it's converted, that hora UTC column is set as the data frames index. This basically organizes the whole data set by date and time. It makes looking at things chronologically the main way we interact with the data.
And then comes that really pivotal step, tackling those NaNs. The code uses dfkl.fillNA 0 in place true, which basically means fill all those empty spots with a 0.
Correct.
Now, okay, this is obviously part of the cleanup you mentioned. It makes the data usable, but patching up data like that, it always feels a bit like you're making an assumption, doesn't it? Is filling all missing values with 0 the, let's say, safe choice here, or does it come with hidden costs, potential misinterpretations?
That's a very insightful question. And it points to a fundamental decision you always have to make in data analysis. Filling missing values with 0, like they did here, it's common.
Yeah.
And often necessary.
Why necessary?
Well, the main benefit is practical.
Yeah.
Many numerical operations, plotting functions, they just can't handle NaN values. They'll throw errors or give weird results. So converting them to zeros makes the data mathematically usable.
Okay, so you can actually calculate totals and averages.
Right. You can sum things up, calculate averages, generate visualizations without the whole thing breaking down. If you wanted to sum all the hours of consumption, for instance, those NaNs would stop you cold. However, and you're absolutely right to flag this choice comes with significant implications and assumptions. By replacing NaN with 0, we are explicitly assuming that on every single day where data was missing for streams, hours, or followers, there was genuinely 0 activity.
Which might not be true.
It might not be true at all, especially for horas de consumo, where nearly 80% of the data was missing. This assumption dramatically impacts the overall averages and totals. If, for example, Spotify's tracking system just wasn't fully working for hours of consumption in the early days.
Which seems plausible.
Or if there were temporary glitches. Filling those days with zeros artificially depresses the podcast's true average engagement. It makes its performance look lower than it might have actually been.
Okay, so it skews the results downwards, potentially.
Potentially, yes. So it raises that important question, is 0 always the best assumption? And the answer is not necessarily. It depends on the context.
Like for followers.
Exactly. For follower counts, maybe a forward fill approach would be better. That's where you replace a missing value with the last known valid value. Because followers tend to accumulate, right? They don't usually drop to 0 day to day.
That makes sense.
For something like plays, which can fluctuate wildly, maybe 0 is reasonable if nothing happened. But for streams, maybe an interpolation estimating a value based on the surrounding days could give a more nuanced picture.
So why choose 0 here then? Just pragmatism.
Largely pragmatism, I suspect. It makes the data functional for plotting and calculating overall totals easily. But it's crucial for Cybermidnight Club, and for you, the listener, interpreting this to remember that this choice can influence the perceived baseline performance, especially for those long-term averages. It's a practical decision, yes, but one that carries a silent assumption about what happened on those missing days.
That's a really crucial distinction. It highlights how data collecting isn't just about tidiness. It's about making deliberate choices that shape the story the numbers ultimately tell.
Absolutely.
So with our data now cleaned, prepped, ready to go, we can move on to the core performance metrics themselves. The summarized report gives us some headline figures for Cybermidnight Club. These are the big numbers, right? The high-level view.
The snapshot totals.
Exactly. We're looking at a total of 12,941 reproducciones, plays, 7,062 total streams, 209.91 total horas de consumo, hours of consumption, and a maximum of 708 seguidores, followers. What's fascinating here is how these numbers stack up against each other. What initial story do they start to paint, just looking at those totals?
Well, these totals give us that essential overview, like you said, a snapshot of the podcast's entire journey from launch right up to the data cutoff point.
Okay.
But as always, the devil's in the details.
Always.
To really unpack Cyber Midnight Club's performance, we need to dig into that granular statistical breakdown, the df.describe output from the code. This gives us the mean, min, max, the percentiles for each metric, and that paints a much more nuanced and, frankly, more honest picture of the day-to-day activity.
Okay, let's break it down. Start with reproducciones, please.
All right, so reproducciones. The count is 2,395 entries, consistent with our daily records. We have a play count for every single day. Good start. The average daily plays is 5.40. Now think about that. An average of roughly 5, maybe 6 plays per day over nearly 2,400 days. That's 6.5 years.
Yeah.
What does that suggest about the overall daily engagement for this podcast? It implies a pretty consistent, maybe slow and steady engagement pattern. It's certainly not explosive viral growth.
No million play days here.
Not even close.
Yeah.
It suggests consistent, maybe modest, daily engagement, which points towards maybe serving a dedicated, perhaps niche audience, rather than aiming for the mass market. The stats also show a minimum of 0 plays on some days, which is totally normal, especially for smaller shows, maybe during holidays or early on.
Sure.
But then look at the maximum, 79 plays in a single day. Now that's a huge spike compared to an average of just 5 or 6.
Massive difference.
What could possibly cause a day to suddenly have 79 plays when the average is so low? This kind of outlier.
Yeah.
It's beta dust for a creator because it often points directly to specific high-impact events. Maybe a brand new episode drop that really hit home. Maybe they had a high-profile guest. Maybe they got mentioned on a much bigger podcast or website.
Or a social media push.
Or targeted social media campaign that just took off. Or even getting featured by Spotify somehow. For Cyber Midnight Club, figuring out exactly what happened on that day or those few peak days would give them invaluable clues about their most effective content or promotion strategies.
That makes sense. Find out what worked and do more of it.
Precisely.
And the percentiles for plays are also incredibly telling, aren't they? They paint a picture of the day-to-day reality. We see 25% of the days had only 1 play or less.
Right.
50% of the days, the median had 3 plays or less. And 75% had 7 plays or less. So literally half the time, this podcast was getting 3 or fewer plays per day. What does that spread really tell us about the consistency, and what kind of audience does it suggest they've built?
This is where the narrative really solidifies. That percentile data, it underscores that while those exciting peak days exist, the vast majority of Cyber Midnight Club's days see very modest activity.
The baseline is low.
The baseline is quite low. The median of 3 plays means that on at least half the days recorded, they got 3 or fewer listens. Now, that's not necessarily failure, not at all. It's just a clear characteristic of many niche podcasts.
Okay.
It tells us that consistent, high-volume daily engagement isn't their defining feature. Their pattern is more like a lower baseline activity, punctuated by these occasional high-impact events that drive those spikes we talked about.
Right.
This spread highlights a common challenge for lots of creators. Building that consistent, highly active audience when your content really appeals to a specific, maybe smaller group. It suggests their audience might be super loyal, but maybe not huge, and maybe not listening every single day.
Okay, moving on to streams. The mean daily streams are 2.95, minimum 0, maximum 47.
So wait. Mean streams 2.95, mean plays 5.4. That's quite a bit lower.
Significantly lower, almost half. And the source report even mentions, generally, a más reproducciones, más streams. More plays means more streams, which implies they should track together. So what's the practical difference between a play and a stream for a podcast? And why are streams so much lower here? This seems important.
It's absolutely critical for understanding audience behavior.
Because I think a lot of us maybe instinctively think play and stream are basically the same thing. You click it, you listen.
Right, but they're not. especially on platforms like Spotify.
Yeah.
They're related, sure, but distinct. A play often just registers that initial interaction. Someone clicked on your episode, maybe it autoplayed for a tiny moment. It's like an impression,
Okay, a click.
a click, essentially.
Hmm.
A stream, on the other hand, typically indicates a more substantial period of listening. Now, Spotify's exact definition isn't public knowledge, but industry standards often define a stream as a listen that goes beyond a few seconds, maybe 30 seconds, maybe a minute, something that indicates genuine engagement.
Ah, okay. Someone actually stuck around for a bit.
Exactly. The fact that streams are significantly lower than plays, on average, for Cyber Midnight Club, tells us that a noticeable chunk of people who play the podcast don't actually stick around long enough to stream it for a meaningful duration.
So they click, but they bail out quickly.
That's what it suggests. And this raises a really important, actionable question about listener completion rate, or at least initial engagement. Are listeners dropping off very quickly?
Why might that happen?
Could be a few things for Cyber Midnight Club. Maybe the episode intros are too long or meandering. Maybe the topic isn't immediately clear or compelling from the start. Maybe even the audio quality in the first few seconds isn't great and puts people off. It suggests there's a big opportunity here to improve that initial hook, the immediate delivery of content, to try and convert more of those initial clicks into sustained listening.
Yeah.
It's kind of like having lots of people pick up your book in a store, but then putting it down after just reading the first page.
That's a huge insight. It's like a funnel, like you said, and there's a leak right at the very top. Okay, let's look at horas de consumo, hours of consumption. The mean daily hours consumed is tiny, 0.088 hours.
Very small.
The total hours consumed over the whole period is 209.91 hours, and the max on one day was 13.5 hours. But that total, 209 hours over nearly 2,400 days, that seems remarkably low, doesn't it?
It does seem quite low when you consider the time frame.
Over 6.5 years of daily data. What does this suggest about average listener engagement per session? Could it mean really short episodes, or are listeners definitely dropping off quickly?
You're right to highlight that. 209.91 total hours over almost 6.5 years is a relatively small cumulative figure. To put it in perspective, it's just over 8 full 24-hour days of continuous listening across the podcast's entire lifespan.
Wow, okay.
And that average of 0.088 hours per day, that works out to roughly 5.3 minutes per day.
Just 5 minutes.
Just over 5 minutes on average. Now, this extremely low average points to a few possibilities. We have to remember that this column had tons of missing data initially, which we filled with zeros.
Right, the 80% missing.
Exactly. So that low average is partially a direct result of that cleaning choice. Those zero-filled days really drag the average down.
Okay, so that skews it.
It definitely contributes. However, even if we only consider the days where data was recorded, when you combine that with the lower stream count relative to plays, it strongly suggests that even for those who do engage, the average session length might be quite brief, or listeners aren't finishing full episodes.
So what could Cyber Midnight Club take from that?
It could indicate two main things. One, maybe their episodes are designed to be very short, like bite-sized, just a few minutes long, and listeners are consuming them fully. That's possible. Or perhaps more likely, if their episodes are a more standard length, say 20, 30, 40 minutes, it signals that listeners are consistently dropping off well before the end.
Which points to
Potential areas for content optimization. Maybe focus on episode pacing, making sure the middle and end are as engaging as the beginning. Or even experimenting with different episode lengths entirely to see what matches their audience's actual attention spans. It's a critical metric for understanding true audience stickiness.
Got it. Okay, finally, Seguidor's followers. The mean here is 367.79 daily followers.
But you said this isn't growth, right?
Correct. It's important to clarify that. This isn't the rate of growth. It's the average of the daily follower count recorded over the entire period.
Ah, okay, so the average number of followers they had on any given day.
Exactly. The minimum is 0, which makes sense. That would be right at the start. And the maximum, the peak follower count they reached, was 708.
So what does this tell us?
It tells us the journey. The podcast went from having 0 followers to eventually building a community of over 700 people who explicitly chose to follow the show. This is fundamentally different from daily plays. It's a key indicator of long-term audience building, establishing that dedicated community.
Plays can be fleeting, followers stick around. Precisely. Followers represent a commitment to ongoing engagement. It's a really valuable metric.
So, okay. We've walked through plays, streams, hours listened, and followers individually. How do these numbers work together? What's the bigger story when we connect these dots for Cyber Midnight Club?
When we connect them, Yeah, the picture becomes remarkably clear. We start seeing the audience behavior and the podcast's life cycle. The main narrative here for Cyber Midnight Club, I think, is one of decent initial discoverability, but maybe a struggle with sustained engagement.
How so?
Well, you've got a relatively high number of plays,
Right.
impresiones, but then noticeably lower actual hours of consumption,
Yeah.
or de consumo, and significantly fewer streams.
Right, the drop-off.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It indicates that while people are finding the podcast, clicking on it, they're not necessarily sticking around for the whole thing, or even for a significant chunk of it.
Curiosity is piqued, but maybe not satisfied.
That's a good way to put it. Initial curiosity seems high, but maybe the content isn't immediately delivering on expectations, or it's not retaining listeners as effectively as it could. It's like having a great shop window display that draws people in.
But once they're inside,
They don't linger or buy anything. They browse quickly and leave. Now, those 708 seguidores, the followers, they are a real beacon of success in this context.
the loyal core.
That's the core community Cyber Midnight Club has managed to cultivate over time. The loyal audience who explicitly said, yes, I want more of this. That's invaluable. Followers measure sustained interest. They provide a stable foundation for future growth.
So the challenges.
The critical challenge and the opportunity for Cyber Midnight Club is, how do they convert more of those valuable followers and more of those initial plays into more consistent streams and higher horas de consumo?
Turn clicks into listens and listeners into fans.
Exactly. It's about transforming that passive interest or initial curiosity into active, prolonged engagement. So the overall story, it's one of successful initial reach, definitely successful community building with those followers, but with clear, actionable opportunities to deepen listener engagement and improve retention.
That makes perfect sense. It's not just about getting people in the door, like you said, but keeping them engaged for the whole show. Now, we don't have the actual charts in front of us visually, but the Python code tells us exactly what kinds of visualizations were generated, which is almost as good, right?
We can definitely talk about what they'd show.
Yeah. Even without seeing them, we can discuss their purpose and the stories they'd likely tell. First up was reproducciones a lo largo del tiempo, plays over time. What's the purpose of this kind of time series plot? And what visual cues would we be looking for, especially given Cyber Midnight Club's average of 5 plays, but that max of 79?
Okay, so the main purpose of plotting plays over time is simply to visualize the daily ebb and flow, the pulse of the podcast's play count.
See the ups and downs.
Exactly. Capture that dynamic rhythm of daily engagement. What we'd expect to see, given the numbers, is probably a baseline of relatively low daily plays, maybe hovering around that average of 5 or 6, but punctuated by distinct picos de actividad, sharp upward spikes.
The 79 play days.
Right. When you observe a significant spike on a chart like this, it's almost always a direct result of something specific happening. For Cyber Midnight Club, with that low average and high max, those spikes would be really pronounced. Very noticeable.
And what could cause them?
Could be a new episode release, especially one that gained unexpected traction. Maybe a cross-promotion or a mention on a bigger show, a successful social media campaign, or maybe even getting featured by Spotify itself.
Imagine seeing those spikes, whether they're small bumps or huge peaks. It immediately makes you ask, okay, what happened on that specific day?
Exactly.
And that kind of detective work, that curiosity, is exactly what a creator needs, right?
Precisely. If, for instance, you saw consistent spikes every Tuesday, well, that strongly suggests Tuesday is your optimal release day for this audience. Or if a sharp spike happened a day or two after you ran a specific social media ad, or after a guest interview you did aired on another show, that's direct, measurable feedback on how well that promotion worked.
So it helps you refine your strategy.
Immensely. It allows Cyber Midnight Club to optimize their content strategy, release schedules, timing of promotions, even identifying which specific topics or guests generated the most immediate buzz. This visualization, even just imagining it, becomes a powerful diagnostic tool. It helps move decisions from guesswork to being data-informed.
Okay, next visualization. Crecimiento de seguidores, follower growth over time. Again, what's the core purpose here? And what kind of growth patterns might we expect to see for a podcast like this? One that eventually hits 708 followers. This one really speaks to the long game, doesn't it? Building that community.
Absolutely. This is all about the long game. The purpose of this plot is to visualize how the podcast's core committed community expanded over its entire lifespan.
Not the daily listeners, but the subscribers.
Exactly. Daily plays can be transient, but follower count represents a much deeper commitment. These are listeners who've actively opted in. We'd expect to see a generally upward trend on this chart, reflecting that journey from 0 followers up to that peak of 708.
Steady growth. Or bursts.
Could be different patterns. Reaching
Okay.
708 suggests a gradual but sustained effort, most likely, rather than a sudden viral explosion overnight. So you might see steady, linear growth, indicating consistent, maybe slow attraction of new listeners through word of mouth or just regular content drops.
Okay.
Alternatively, you could theoretically see an exponential curve. That's the dream for many creators, right? Accelerating growth due to increasing momentum or something going viral.
Less likely here, maybe?
Perhaps less likely given the other numbers, but possible. Or less ideally, you might see a plateauing curve, where growth was happening, but then it slowed down significantly after reaching a certain point.
What would that mean?
That could indicate maybe market saturation within their niche, or perhaps a need to find new ways to attract followers. But for Cyber Midnight Club, just having 708 followers, even if built slowly, signifies a pretty healthy expanding audience that's choosing to subscribe.
It shows loyalty.
It shows loyalty.
Yeah.
And a strong follower growth curve is arguably more valuable and sustainable in the long run than just high transient play counts. It means you have a direct line to a receptive audience every time you release something new. That really underpins the podcast's long-term viability.
Right. It's the difference between just a moment of attention and actually building a relationship with your audience. Okay, finally, the third visualization. Relación entre reproducción y streams. The relationship between plays and streams. This one's a scatter plot. What's its purpose? What would a podcaster hope to see? And crucially, what about outliers? Points that don't fit the trend.
Okay, this scatter plot is designed to visually compare daily plays against daily streams side by side, and most importantly, to visualize their correlation.
How closely they move together.
Exactly. Each single point on this plot represents one day. Its play count is on one axis, its stream count on the other. Now, correlation here means how tightly linked these two metrics are. In an ideal world for Cyber Midnight Club, or any podcaster really, you'd hope to see a strong positive correlation.
What does that look like?
On the plot, it would look like a cloud of points generally trending upwards, from the bottom left corner towards the top right, kind of forming a rough line or shape going up.
Like more plays generally means more streams.
Precisely. Think of it like if you sold more ice cream cones, you'd expect to sell more scoops of ice cream too, right? They move together. A strong positive correlation here would mean that when you get more plays on a given day, you are reliably getting more actual listens too. It confirms your plays aren't just vanity metrics, they're actually turning into sustained listening.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for a podcaster, I think. This scatter plot feels like the ultimate truth teller. It's answering that question. Are people actually listening after they hit play? So what kind of outliers, points that don't fit that nice upward trend, would raise a red flag or maybe reveal a surprising success?
Exactly. This plot cuts right to the quality of engagement. A strong positive correlation is great. It confirms things are working as expected. But often it's the outliers, those points floating away from the main trend, where the most fascinating and actionable insights hide.
Give me an example. A bad one first.
Okay, a bad one. Imagine a point way out on the right, showing very high plays, but way down low on the streams axis. So lots of plays, but disproportionately few streams for that day.
High clicks, low listens.
High clicks, low listens. That's a significant red flag. It suggests that on that particular day, or maybe for that specific episode released that day, lots of people clicked, but very few actually stuck around to listen for any length of time.
Why would that happen?
Could be a misleading episode title or description that set the wrong expectation. Could be a really unengaging intro that made people tune out immediately. Could even be a technical problem, bad audio quality on that specific day's upload that made people just give up.
So that outlier tells Cyber Midnight Club.
He tells them, go look very closely at what happened on this day or with this episode. Re-examine it. Was the content off? Was the promotion misleading? Was there a technical glitch?
Okay, what about a good outlier?
A good outlier is rarer, but equally insightful. Imagine a point that's maybe not super far to the right. It's not massive plays, but surprisingly high up on the streams axis. Relatively low plays, but unexpectedly high streams or hours listened for that number of plays.
What would that mean?
It might suggest that while the episode didn't get huge reach, a small, dedicated group of listeners engaged very deeply with it. Maybe they re-listened multiple times. Maybe they shared it within a small, tight-knit community that really devoured it. It points towards content that, while maybe not broadly appealing, created intense engagement among a core group. Could indicate your superfans loved that particular piece of content. So this scatter plot is just invaluable. It directly helps the podcaster understand the quality of their plays. Are they just surface-level clicks, or are they leading to genuine listening? And that directly informs strategies to turn that initial interest into sustained, valuable listening time.
So, okay, we've journeyed all the way from understanding the raw, sometimes messy data. We've deep dived into the summary stats. We've even imagined the powerful stories these visual trends would tell. But what does all of this mean for someone actually creating the content? Specifically for Cyber Midnight Club, this isn't just a cool academic exercise. It's a roadmap, right? How can they use these insights to actually drive their podcast forward?
It absolutely is a roadmap,
Yeah.
and potentially an incredibly powerful one if they use it right. For Cyber Midnight Club, these insights provide clear, data-backed directives for strategic improvement.
Okay, like what? Actionable steps.
Okay, first, by using that reproducciones a lo largo del tiempo, plot the plays over time chart, they can pinpoint those days with significantly higher plays. And ideally, cross-reference that with days that also had higher hours of consumption.
Find the hits.
Find the hits. If these peaks consistently line up with specific episode releases, it gives them almost undeniable evidence about what type of content, which topics, maybe even which guests, resonate most deeply with their specific audience. This lets them confidently double down on successful themes or formats that have already proven effective. Less guessing, more certainty.
Makes sense. What else?
Second, optimizing their release schedule becomes much clearer. If those play spikes reliably happen on, say, Tuesdays or Thursdays,
Stick to it.
stick to it. Reinforce that schedule. Build listener anticipation around it. Conversely, if some days consistently show almost zero activity, they might need to reconsider if that's the best time slot for new content, or maybe their promotional efforts for those days just aren't landing. Again, it moves scheduling from a gut feeling to a data-informed decision.
Okay. Number 3.
Thirdly, and this feels really crucial based on the data, that significant gap between plays, reproducciones, and streams. That points directly to a need for better engagement strategies.
Fixing the leaky funnel.
Fixing the leaky funnel. If, as the data strongly suggests, many initial clicks aren't turning into meaningful listens, Cyber Midnight Club needs to focus intensely on improving listener retention. How do they keep people listening longer?
How?
Well, they could try several tactical experiments. Maybe try shorter, more punchy episodes if the current ones are long and people seem to be dropping off. They could really focus on nailing the first few minutes of each episode, a stronger hook, clearer value proposition right up front.
Grab them immediately.
Grab them immediately, maybe integrate more interactive elements, ask questions, use stronger calls to action within the episode, not just at the end, to keep listeners invested.
Interesting. Okay, one more.
Lastly, that follower growth chart. It's vital for long-term community building. By tracking that growth curve, Cyber Midnight Club can actually assess how effective their calls to action for subscriptions are. You know, when they say hit follow in the episode or in their show notes.
Or are people actually doing it?
Are people actually doing it? Are they consistently converting casual listeners into loyal followers? If the growth curve starts to plateau, they might need to refine those calls to action. Maybe offer subscriber-exclusive perks, or try different ways on other platforms to drive committed listeners back to Spotify to hit follow.
Right.
Ultimately, this data provides concrete, measurable evidence to guide all these strategic decisions. It helps transform abstract goals like grow the podcast into informed, actionable plans for real growth and better engagement.
That's incredibly actionable. It really does take these raw numbers and turns them into a direct playbook for improving the podcast. But as with any data set, right, no matter how detailed it seems, there are always limitations, things it can't tell us. So, what can't this specific Spotify data tell Cyber Midnight Club? And why is understanding these blind spots just as important as knowing the insights we've just discussed?
That's a really important question. Critical thinking about data limitations is paramount. You have to know what the data doesn't tell you to avoid jumping to wrong conclusions.
So what's missing here?
Well, while this Spotify data is undeniably rich, it can't tell Cyber Midnight Club everything. For instance, it doesn't tell them why those spikes in plays happened, not without external context.
Right, it shows the what, but not the why.
Exactly. We see a spike occurred on a certain date, but was it because of the episode released that day? Was it a mention on a popular blog? Was it a social media campaign they ran? Was it a guest appearance they did elsewhere? The data itself doesn't know unless Cyber Midnight Club is meticulously tracking all those external events and manually correlating them.
So they need to layer on their own tracking.
They absolutely do. Also, the data is generally confined to Spotify's ecosystem.
Hmm.
We don't get listener demographics, age, gender, geographic location, which are super crucial for tailoring content, maybe finding advertisers, or just understanding the broader market for their niche.
Okay, no demographics. What else?
Furthermore, this specific dataset seems to be aggregated daily, not per individual episode.
Ah, that's big.
It is. It means Cybermidnight Club can't easily use this data alone to pinpoint which specific episodes were the biggest hits in terms of plays, streams, or completion rate. They see the overall daily performance, but not those granular episode-by-episode breakdowns, which would be incredibly valuable for planning future content.
They'd need episode-level analytics for that.
Precisely. We also get no insight into the impact of marketing efforts that happen entirely outside of Spotify. Like if they run ads on TikTok or Instagram, or drive traffic from their website blog, or send out an email newsletter. This data only shows the result on Spotify, not where that traffic originated.
Can't track the whole customer journey.
Not from this data alone. And similarly, it tells us absolutely nothing about the competitive landscape. How do Cybermidnight Club's numbers stacked up against other podcasts in their specific genre or niche? Are they doing great compared to similar shows, or are they actually underperforming? Without that external context, the picture remains incomplete.
So knowing these limitations is key.
It's absolutely key. It helps Cybermidnight Club understand that while this Spotify data is powerful, it's just one piece of a much larger puzzle. It highlights that crucial need for a holistic view, combining these internal performance metrics with external market intelligence, maybe some audience surveys, and tracking their own promotional activities to truly understand their performance and build a thriving podcast. #TagTagOutro.
So we've really come full circle then. We started with raw, sometimes kind of messy data, and we've worked through how to clean it, analyze it, and transform it into meaningful, actual insights for this podcast, Cyber Midnight Club. We've seen how numbers like plays, streams, hours consumed, and followers, they aren't just abstract figures on a page. They actually tell a compelling, almost human story about audience engagement, loyalty, and growth.
Yeah, they really do.
It really underscores the profound value of understanding your audience through these numbers, even for something as creative and maybe personal as making a podcast.
Indeed. It's a testament to how data, when you analyze it properly, when you interrogate it, ask the right questions.
Yeah.
It can really illuminate the path forward. It can move us beyond just intuition or guesswork towards making evidence-based decisions.
Right.
So as you, the listener, think about your own projects, maybe your own content creation, or even just your daily life where information and data are constantly being generated all around us. Consider this.
How might you apply this kind of data-driven thinking? Not just to podcasts, obviously, but to any form of content you create, any personal project you're passionate about, or even just everyday decisions where data might be available, even if you hadn't looked for it before. What hidden stories might the numbers in your own life or your own work be trying to tell you, just waiting for you to, well, dive deep and uncover them?